Hi everyone, it's Ryan. I just think that it's time for me to share my side of everything that really happened to me in 2021. There was a lot that everybody really is unaware of, especially when I spent my first month at a local hospital in their behavioral health unit, where a lot of my PTSD has came from. I would like to talk about that, and I just really want this video to get out to those nurses and doctors who has to deal with mental illness and neurology. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I have. It's called anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis, and it is when the B cells of the body are triggered to block the NMDA receptors of the brain, and therefore there are neurological pathways that are blocked, and this causes a lot of neurological issues, which unfortunately come off as psychosis and as mental disorders. I was presenting with a lot of mental disorders when I was admitted. When the ER doctors and nurses saw me, you know, it was obvious that they thought I was having some sort of panic attack. I was not sleeping well, but I just really want everybody to be more aware, so what happened to me doesn't happen to anybody else, especially in our community. I was admitted on, I believe, April 21st was the second time I had went into the hospital. On April 18th, I went into the hospital in the middle of the night because I was having some serious paranoia, high anxiety, really wasn't sure what was going on, so I had my then fiance and my sister bring me to the emergency room in the middle of the night, where they saw me and just saw I was having a panic attack, and they gave me some Ativan, and that calmed me down. But within a week, everything came back, and on the 21st of April 2021 I was admitted. A lot of people have asked me what it was before, like, coming down with this encephalitis, you know, not really knowing what it was. I was having the worst anxiety of my life. I was very anxious about everything I did. I was going to be doing, talking to people, making sure I hear people correctly. I was working 3 jobs at the time, mostly at our local vet clinic and the college, our community college that we have. And those are 2 things that I love to do so much. I am a veterinary technician, and I'm really good at working with large animals, as I grew up on a dairy farm. So it was something I really love doing. I haven't gotten to go back to those after I got sick. I was doing a lot. It started off when I was calling my sister a lot, telling her, you know, I'm having a lot of anxiety. I mean, I'd call her just bawling on the phone, did not understand what was happening to me. I would tell her I don't know what to do next, but in my day, it was like if I didn't have some sort of schedule, I wasn't able to function correctly. I needed somebody to tell me what it is I needed to do. And it was very much, I couldn't do anything, you know, by myself. I mean, I was able to do things, but I needed someone to tell me what it is, how I needed to feel. It was, yeah, like they said, the worst anxiety of my life. The week, I would say, following being admitted, going to the ER was really bad. I wasn't sleeping a whole lot. I was telling everybody, and you know, I remember this too. I was reliving the same day over and over again. It felt like the worst form of deja vu ever. Like things would, like I would go to work and I would swear that what it was I was doing had happened the day before. I had left work, both of them, kind of on like a medical leave, and I was at home, and at this time my mom was with me, so my sister was also, I can't really remember, I think she was with me, but I was at my own home here with my fiance, and my mom was, you know, helping me through it, and she was really helping me with contacting my primary care physician and seeing him and telling him what was going on. I did get recommended to go see just a counselor, and the thing that she told me was I needed to take more walks, get outside, you know, journal, do all of the things that a person with high anxiety and depression has just regular clinically. I was watching TV, you know, my favorite show, The Office, and I would be watching it, and they would literally, the show was happening in reverse order for me. I was watching it, and it was like they were talking backwards, and I couldn't handle it. It was like, so I was so paranoid, I just said, turn it off. Something else that I remember a lot was we had, at the time it was spring, we were going into spring, we had a dove's nest had nested over the drain spout on our neighbor's house, and I could hear them cooing and cooing and cooing, and I was so annoyed of that. And I literally told my fiance, I was like, go shoot them. I would never, that was not normal for me. I would never say that. When things really got bad, I would be sitting on the floor when Shane would come home, and I would just be bawling and talking on the phone. I needed to talk to somebody until somebody could be with me. I would talk to my sister, I would talk to my mom, and then until Shane could physically come home and be with me, you know, to help calm me down. But it was like being in a constant state of panic, and I was scared. I was so scared because I couldn't describe what it was that was going on with me, but I knew something was wrong. I then started with the unaliving threats. I was threatening that I would take all of my medication that I had, and at the time I had gotten more medication, anti-depression and anti-anxiety meds. Granted, I was on Zoloft for probably like middle school. I mean, I was taking Zoloft every day for just my anxiety, and that seemed, you know, that was good, that was fine. I was able to be maintained like that, nothing, a problem with that. I had a lot of meds at that time, but I felt I did, and I mean, I was threatening my sister, and I was threatening my now husband. I was threatening him that I was going to take them all. I always said, if you don't bring me to the ER, I'm going to take all my meds. And I remember getting up off the couch, lunged for the bathroom, and at that time Shane, he got up after me, he caught me. That was it. That was it. My sister, you know, I think she said, do you really want to go to the ER? I said, yes, please take me, because I knew something was wrong, and I felt like that was the only thing I could say or do to get the help that I needed. It was like I was, you know, screaming internally, but what it was my brain was slowly becoming more and more inflamed. My sister took me to the ER at noon, I believe. Shane was not with me, he was at work. But I was admitted. I remember being in the ER. They were asking all of my, you know, conditions and stuff like that. And I literally had Bridget, she was speaking for me. I was laying on the bed in the ER. My sister gave me my phone to watch The Office just to make sure that I was, you know, preoccupied while she was filling out this paperwork. And I remember signing documents and admitting myself, and it's what I wanted to do. And I did tell them that I had attempted to take all of my meds, the nurses in the ER. It felt like I was, I was like having a panic attack. I thought how it was gonna go. This is what I thought was happening to me, was I would be placed in some inpatient bed and get fluids or meds to help me feel better, and my mom would come and be with me, and I would be there, and I'd be out in a few days, and that would be it. Then I would be better. I didn't think I was gonna be there for a month nonetheless, but I didn't get to see my family. I remember in the paperwork, it said that people were able, my family should be able to visit me if they had proof of a COVID vaccine, because this was in the midst of COVID. Well, my mom and my dad for sure participated in the Moderna trials and with Pfizer, and they had gotten the vaccines, way before anybody else. And my sister also did, as she was in the middle of pharmacy school at the med center. So she had to get those vaccines, and I told them, I'm like, yes, they have their cards, they can show proof, they can, to be able to come and see me. And, that's what I was told would be accepted for them to see me. I remember being, wheeled up in a wheelchair and my sister was with me. I had asked if she could come with me. And we went, and then we went up an elevator. We got out of the elevator to a certain floor, and that's when they said, okay, Bridget can't, she couldn't go any further. She said, I can't go any further with you. And I was really confused. I was very confused because she took my phone and she was crying. And I was like, I don't understand. I'm like, why are you crying? Like, this isn't bad, right? Like, what's happening to me? I'm here to get help, to feel better, so they figure out what's wrong with me. And I just, okay. I think she gave me a hug and said she loved me. And I just really didn't understand at the time what that was about. But I do now. I was asked to change into scrubs. They took my clothes, shoes, put them in a bag with my name on it. They watched me get undressed and changed. These two ladies did. And I remember telling them that it's okay, like, that I'm okay with undressing in front of you, because I had just recently got my wedding dress. A lady obviously helped me get into my dress. And I said, I was okay with it. And they asked me, when's my wedding and stuff like that. And at the time, in 2021, it was in October. But that had gotten moved. I was wheeled in the behavioral health unit. Had no idea what I was in for. I had no idea what the place was. I was showed to my room. I remember exactly how that building is laid out. Or that floor, I should say. It was on the 4th floor. I believe I was in a room, I think it started, maybe it was either with a 6 or a 4. But it was all in like a C shape. And the nurse's desk was in the middle. Or like the nurse's station was like in the middle, and I was like around the corner on the outside. And on the outside was like most of the rooms, and then there was like a little commons area where we would eat, and there was like a TV. In my room, I went in there, and the first thing I did was, I looked out the window, and I looked down, and I could see this little courtyard between the building I was in and the building next to it, which was the other part of the hospital, the entrance. And down at the bottom was this koi pond. And I remember thinking to myself, well, at least I have that to look at, was the koi pond. Really simple room. It was obviously simple because they have that whole place rigged to make sure that nobody can hurt themselves. I thought it was super weird that I didn't understand it at the time, but I did now, or I do now, and like I did, the door to my bathroom was this, it was like a piece of foam. It was covered in like in blue plastic. It's like what you would see like at a gym, like a gymnastics kind of like pad. And it had Velcro on it, and it was the door to the bathroom. And it wasn't very big. this little flap, I would call it. And it was very weird because the hinges for it was Velcro, and if you wanted to shut it was just this Velcro strap that you would strap to the wall. And I didn't understand at the time, like, why is this like this? And when I got to the point of being so sick, they took the door off of my bathroom so they could see what was happening in the bathroom. I remember when that happened, it freaked me out because there's cameras in those rooms, and I remember thinking, while I was showering once, I'm like, well, can they see me right now? Like, I didn't know. Back to when I first had gotten there, I called my mom, told her I fucked up, and said, I need you to come get me because this is not where I'm supposed to be. I don't understand why I'm here. I wanted her to come get me. And the only thing I think she could really do is reassure me that I'll be okay. Thinking that I'd only be there for a few days, you know, 3 days at the most. I went back to my room and I sat there until they brought me dinner. Well, they had asked me if I wanted to go out and sit with everybody else to eat dinner, and I said no, and I ate in my room. And I remember the lady telling me, well, we don't really like it when you eat in your room, but we'll allow you because it's your first night here. And when I was in tears the whole time, I was freaking out. I had this little ledge in my room that was supposed to be a table with this chair. It was just a plastic chair. In the bathroom, there was this little cubby on the one side of it, and it was like a metal sink, and the mirror wasn't really like a mirror when you looked up. It was kind of like just a really reflective metal. There was no glass. And the shower was really confusing. I really didn't get the shower at all. I remember having one of the nurses come and help me trying to figure out how to use the shower, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, and the water was either really, really hot or really, really cold. It was awful. That first night I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried myself to sleep. I got up in the middle of the night went to the nurse's station saying, hey, can I have something to help me sleep? And they gave me probably Ativan. The only thing they had not taken from me was my ponytail. And I remember holding it because it was the only thing I had. Holding it in my hands and just sleeping with it. So things are, from my view, things, yes, definitely are a little bit mixed up. I have read the notes, the doctor's notes from my stay at our local hospital. This is how big it is. I don't even know how many pages this is. Well over like 600 probably. Full of days of notes of my behavior, of assessments from doctors, from behavioral therapists and stuff, and nurses. All of this, and I read it. So I read it a while ago with my mom. I was able to put bits and pieces together with what I remember, but what I remember was much, much more traumatic and different from what they recorded. I definitely remember some things that I said to them. There was things in there that I don't remember saying. But I was there a week and things really gone downhill because my brain was getting more and more and more inflamed. And all they saw was the cookie cutter, bipolar, schizophrenic person that they thought they saw. I wanted to talk a little bit about the phone. When I first noticed it, when I was wheeled into the unit, I saw a girl. And, you know, I was like, I can't wait to use that phone to call my mom. I'm going to call her immediately. It was what I can only say was a prison phone. Like the silver box, and it had a black phone, and the cord was literally like this long. From the handle of the phone to the actual, like, where it hooked up. You were allowed only 3 outgoing calls. You can receive as many incoming calls, like whoever calls you. You were only allowed 3 outgoing calls, and if that person didn't pick up on the other end, then that counted. It was like on a piece of paper next to the phone. It had like the rules and how long you needed to keep it, usually like 10 to 15 minutes, how, you know, everybody has to share the phone. How it worked was you would pick up the phone and the nurse would patch you through, and, you know, vice versa, as if you were going to have an outgoing call. You would pick up the phone and they would have to send your call out. I can't remember exactly. Maybe there was like a dial pad and you had to push a certain button, but otherwise the phone didn't like work any other time. But it was so hard to use the phone because of the cord being so short, because, you know, safety. I understand that. Either you had to sit up really high on a chair and be like extremely close to the wall, or you had to bend over the whole time, like bend over at the waist or kneel down, kinda. My mom was the first one that I called, like I felt within minutes of getting there. And something that was really scary to me, gave me a lot of more anxiety than what I had, was I have always had a hard time remembering numbers and phone numbers. And my mom, dad, and Shane, everybody, sister, have had the same phone numbers. And it was so hard for me to not have anxiety of me not being able to remember my mom's or my dad's phone number. I believe they pulled it from the copy of emergency contacts that my sister filled out for me when I was admitted. But you also, like, on the phone, couldn't hear the other person on the line, the other line, very well, and they couldn't hear you. There was a lot of "what did you say?" and crackling and breaking up a lot of the time. And it was stupid. I had went in wearing my contacts. I wear glasses at night, but I have contacts. I think I got through like 3 days wearing contacts. They're daily contacts too. I had cried so much that they, you know, eventually came out, and I remember not being able to see. I remember talking to my mom on the phone when she called, I don't know how many days in, I only know it was a few days in, and I had asked her, I said, I can't see, and she said, well, haven't the nurses given you your glasses? And I said, no. And she said, well, Bridget dropped them off, they should have them. And she's like, go ask the nurses station. And I said, okay, I will. And I did, and they had them. They gave them to me. I don't know how long they had them. I also remember asking if I could have something from home. Like, I wanted my blanket, my heart blanket that was with me all of being a UNMC. I wanted something from home. I needed something. I had nothing. I guess a little bit more of things I just observed. Something that was a little bit scary to me was I had realized after a couple days that the unit that I was on the floor wasn't like split between men and women. I thought I was with all women, but it was men and women together, and that scared me. A lot of the people that were up there were for drug detox, all pretty much drug-related incidences, just from when I was talking to them. I had wanted to shower. I had asked, you know, a nurse that I saw, she was in like this utility closet where they had all the shampoo and the towels, and I said, can I take a shower? Like, nobody's really given me anything, and our toothbrush. She said, oh yeah, we gotta, you know, give you the stuff to shower. I asked for more than one towel because these towels they give you are like no bigger than a hand towel. They're small. And at the time I had like a lot of hair. It was really long. For shampoo and conditioner, they would just give you these little cups, like a condiment cup, and they just fill it up with one with shampoo and one with conditioner. And I like remember asking, like, I need more than this. I have a lot of hair. This isn't gonna be enough for me. And another one had body wash in it too. I remember having such a hard time showering, and the water was either extremely cold or extremely hot. There was like no in between. The toothbrush they gave me was like this cheap little toothbrush, and they gave me like a little tube of toothpaste. I just remember thinking to myself, this is just what's gonna have to do for now. I had a hard time showering. One thing that was hard, like also hard, was I had asked after I showered, like, can I have a brush to brush my hair. The lady had asked, like, we only have picks, like hair picks, and like men's like fine tooth combs. And I was like what? Like, and they didn't have any sort of ponytail holders or anything like that. I think at the time I had lost my ponytail holder. She gave me both a pick and a comb, and I remember so hard trying to brush my hair and comb it after I got done with a shower. I was trying to brush my hair with it, and it was so hard, and I was getting so frustrated. And something that I always did every night before I went to bed, like after I showered, I would braid my hair, and that's how I'd sleep in it. And I knew things were a problem with what was happening in my head, because I forgot how to braid my hair. I was having a hard time trying to move my fingers in the right order, in the right way, just to braid. Something I've been doing since I was a little girl. And I remember being so worried. I feel like I didn't stop crying the whole time I was there. And I had went to the nurses and I'm like, I can't braid my hair. Can you help me braid my hair? And they said, of course not. We can't do that. Can't touch you unless they have to. I was freaking out. I also had a really hard time, you know, after I got my glasses. I couldn't read the clock, the analog clock that was sitting next, that would be like right by the TV. Well, in the commons area, I would say, the commons area, there was like a couple tables to eat at with some chairs, and there was like a couch. It wasn't even like a couch, it was kind of just like a bench with cushions, and then there was like 2 chairs, you know, something that you'd probably see in their waiting rooms. There was like right, you know, there was an outside window, and then there was a wall, and then the TV, and on that one wall there on the right side was a thing of cabinets, and on the bottom and on the wall, and they were full of things like puzzles and board games and cards and books. There was coloring pages out and crayons. I took a real interest to like coloring is something I like to do, and I was like, I didn't have anything else to do, so I was going to color. Had mostly very detailed mandala pictures in which they gave us these crummy, cheap crayons that almost all of them were broken when I found them. To color these very detailed like mandala pictures, they would obviously need something else to color. It was very infuriating, and I was trying to be detailed. I remember at night I had asked to, you know, I didn't want my curtain up or down, you know, and they had a scheduled wake up time and nighttime. The lights would come on this time, the lights would go out this time, you know, and if you weren't up, they were going to come and get you. And they would also come in the morning and take your blood pressure and your vitals. There was this lady that come in with like a portable blood pressure thing and an oximeter. And I remember seeing all of the blood pressure cuffs just hanging from it with everybody's name on a different one, and I was one of those. I wanted them to close my curtain sometimes when I was in my room because I wanted to sleep, and they wouldn't let me. And I remember one of the, like when I first was trying to figure everything out, I was looking at, I'm like, how do I shut this curtain? And I realized like it was between the 2 panes of glass, this shade that would lower. I went out in the hallway and someone told me, well, we have to close it for you. Like they close it for you. They have like a key they would put into the wall that it's like on the right outside of the door in the hallway for them to lower and open your curtain. You had no control over that. That was really irritating. The bed wasn't real comfortable. It was like one of those blue mattresses that were washable with foam in it. Had blankets, and they gave me an extra pillow, I know, and I was really struggling as things were changing. When we would order food, or like when you would order your meals, that was something I had really gotten confused with too, not only because of the encephalitis, but because of how the process went. And what they would do is they'd hand you a menu, they'd hand everybody these menus, and they would say, okay, you have to pick something from each of these categories, and you have to circle them with a crayon what you wanted, and then they would collect the menus and they'd go down and get that stuff all ready, like your order. And I would mostly just circle the stuff that I liked, and that would be maybe like 3 or 4 things in the same category. And they say, oh no, you can't do that. You can't do it, you can't order like that. How about this? How about this? How about this? And I didn't understand that. Like I didn't understand it at all. I just wanted to eat what I wanted to eat. There was these group therapies that they would do every day too, and only on the weekdays, not on the weekends. On the weekends, they'd give us these activity packets to work on. The closest thing they could do to some sort of exercise, which was these weird you're sitting in a chair and they would play the video on the screen in the little commons area that they had where we would eat, and then you'd have to follow along with these chair exercises. And it was, I just thought, really odd. I didn't understand what it was doing for me. They were trying, these therapists, I think they were physical therapists or something, they were different than the nurses. They tried their best to get us engaged, and they were very cheerful and happy and trying to be as positive as possible, but I was just feeling like they were so fake. What are you trying to, you know, keep from me? You're pulling the wool over my eyes from something else that I don't know. And I think that's probably when more paranoia had kicked in, because I thought that everybody there was trying to make sure I never got out again. There was group therapies, and there was like venting. We would go around the room and talk. Over there by the phone there was another table, and there was a couple more seats there. And then on the other side of the phone where I had entrance in this kind of C-shaped area was a small little room with another TV in it, which I had realized was for telehealth at, you know, one point. I felt like it was like more than one day before I actually saw the doctor that treated me. When I first met the doctor, and, you know, I was asking a lot of why I was in there, you know, and I never was given like a really straightforward answer. I knew probably it was because I said I was going to overdose on all my meds. But I was the one that had brought it. I brought that up to him when he would come. He came and met with me the first time in my room, and I told him I didn't mean it. I remember I told nurses that. I remember when I was admitted, I said that I was gonna take all my pills, but I didn't mean it. I didn't, is what I kept saying. I mean, I wasn't gonna actually do it. I was just saying that because I needed something. But they take that very seriously. Very, very seriously. Even after I told them so many times I wasn't going to hurt myself. After it was recorded several times, I had zero suicidal ideation or thoughts in my notes by the doctor. I had none. But I was still there. Trapped. When he came onto the floor, I was in my room, and I'm like hearing everybody outside talking and like things going on, and I like peek out my door and I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And I see him, and I see everybody just flocking to him. All these patients just wanting to get a word in with this guy. So I had asked, I'm like, okay, when are you gonna talk to me? You know, and he's like, you wait in your room and I will come to you. You'll come down the line. I don't know if it was him or a nurse that told me that, but I went back in my room and I took my chair and I sat it across from my bed, and I waited for him, and I sat there on my bed, and I tried my hardest to keep it together. When I was on the phone once, I think it was with my mom, I was crying so hard because all I wanted to do was go home. And I remember there was this Hispanic girl that was there, and she was sitting on the chairs next to the phone, and she saw me get upset. She asked me why I was there, and I told her I don't really know. I had told them that I was going to take all my meds, and she said, well, they don't take that very lightly around here. She says, if you want to get out of here, you got to tell them what they want to hear. When the doctor comes, what he wants to hear, what's good. And do all of the therapies, to be involved as much as you can. And I said, okay, and I tried. And when I saw him finally, I tried my hardest to make like the best impression. I was crying. I ended up crying, and I didn't, you know, obviously he took that as, well, she's obviously bipolar. I told him, you know, I wanted to go home. I said, you know, I remember stating at the time, I am 25 years old. I would like to go home. And it was more than 3 days. It was more than this quarantine hour when somebody has suicidal thoughts. I said I would like to unadmit myself from this hospital. I would like to leave on my own discretion, please. And they wouldn't let me because there was something still wrong with me. I was crying. That probably is why I was not very convincing. I felt like I talked to him for a long time, and I didn't get a whole lot of feedback what was wrong with me. I remember I was having to take different meds. a lot of meds that made me not sleep, which like led to a lot of issues too. I would ask every day, could I go home? I remember eating dinner one night and I had a call on the phone, and I remember one of the nurses saying, "You're really popular because you just keep getting calls all day." You know, I had everybody. I had Shane, Bridget, I think called me maybe once. My mom was always calling. It was so hard to hear them. It was so hard to hear anybody. I feel like I was a victim of medical gaslighting. They thought I was acting on purpose, this behavior, but it wasn't. I couldn't control what was happening to me or my body. I couldn't control what I was saying or my movements or my actions. It was like I thought of it in my head, but then I would actually act on it and not realize I did it until afterwards. And it wasn't like I was having out-of-body experiences. I remember it in first person. We were always fighting over the TV too, the patients. Somebody would come in and you know, they'd get up really early to get the TV on to what channel they wanted. There was like a glass thing that had the TV channels in it on the opposite side of the wall of the TV. They would say they wanted a channel, the nurse would come out and change it, they'd go back in, and someone would come out and say they wanted a different channel, they'd come out and change it, you wouldn't get to watch what you wanted to watch. The trash cans, there were paper bags. I had one in my room. That was really confusing to me too. I didn't understand. I remember this one girl, she was a blonde. I remember she would really pester the nurses and stuff like that. She made me a little on edge, but at the same time, like, I could feel that she was being rebellious and she knew being there, but it was crap, she thought. I remember one day she said, "We're all crazy here. They think we're all crazy here." She yelled that. We were all sitting around on these tables talking or coloring or playing games or whatever. She saw the glass and she's like, "Should I break it?" And I said, "No, I probably shouldn't break it." When it came to eating, you know, we would all eat together, and I was like really weird about who I was gonna sit with. So I really didn't know anybody. I never got to know anybody. I don't remember anybody's names. We got coffee with every single meal, and I would always trade my coffee for someone's dessert, and I remember we got yelled at once for doing that because COVID, even though we were all negative. They were all wearing masks. Everybody, all the nurses were wearing masks. That was something else that was really hard for me to recognize people because everybody's wearing a freaking mask. I could not see who they were or recognize who they were. Their social worker come and talked to me a few times. You know, I told her everything that was going on, and I remember she had tried to get a video chat set up on an iPad with my mom, and what she did, but the quality of it was so crappy. I could barely see my mom, and she barely could see me, and then that was it. It lasted maybe like 5 minutes, with half of it being not knowing what she was saying and the image being all broke out, and it was heartbreaking. I was so excited to just finally see my mom, and I couldn't even depend on that. And every time I talked to her, I asked, "Can you please come get me? I'm scared. I don't want to be here." And I told the nurses I was scared, and all they could say was, "You're gonna be all right." I was having panic attacks. They were coming into my room and doing breathing exercises with me that I felt like wouldn't help. I couldn't sleep at night. They gave me a cheap little white box sun machine. It only had like white noise, rain, and crickets was it on this thing. You just pushed a button, it would play it, and it was really crappy. You couldn't really hear it. The batteries were taped on the back. I remember thinking, what if I peeled the duct tape off these batteries? What would happen? I mean, and at this point I was doing a lot of rambunctious things. I was starting to try and escape. I wanted to get out. I remember looking out the window onto the parking lot, the big window. You know, my window to my room only looked out to another building. I never got to see the rest of the world besides my little window from my room and then the window that was in the commons area, which was a pretty big window. And it looked out to a parking lot and to a Casey's across the street, and I remember looking and just waiting to see somebody I knew. I'd sit there for hours looking out, like from 4 a.m. just looking and watching until they would tell me I needed to go do something else. I was trying to see a vehicle I could see that I knew. My mom's vehicle, my dad's truck, Shane's truck, anything. Outside was freedom. And I remember looking at the Casey's across the street thinking about all the good food that was there. And how many times I've been to that gas station at my job as a tech. Late night farm calls, we'd hit up the Casey's, get something to eat, and to keep going. Nurses would come, and I remember in the morning when we would have to line up to get our meds in these cups, right there on the counter, they would, on the other side of this glass, had Scooters coffee, all of them, right there in front of us, in front of me, and it was crap. Something I couldn't have, something from the outside world that I could familiarize myself with. They would bring in freaking food all the time on the other side of this glass. It was a glass, like, sea. There was just this one little cubby hole and this one little, like, thing with, like, holes in it to talk to them through it. It was, like, taunting. And we were stuck with eating hospital food. I remember the first time I tried to escape, there was doors, 2 sets of doors. There was a door that I came in on one end, and on the other side, past my room, was a door on the other side. And the door on the other side, I had now realized, was actually the door to getting out into the lobby. The door that I came in, the kind of like inside door where the patient side is, the patient elevator and all that stuff, that wasn't the exit. I thought it was, because that's the way I came in. But I would go walking, and they had this thing where it was a piece of paper on the wall. It said, you know, you walk this many times in this little C shape, it's this many miles, and there was always groups of people walking together, and I would walk by myself, and I would hover at those doors, and someone would yell at me, you know, Ryan, you stay away from that door, and I would hover, and I would go over to the other door, and I would hover, just waiting for an opportunity for that freaking thing to open. The only way you could get in and out was through key cards. They gave me a hospital cup to drink out of. We all were allowed to have these hospital cups, and they wrote my name on one, and you would have to go to the nurse and ask for more water because they wouldn't fit under your sink, and they'd usually put ice in it. I'd always ask for no ice because it was really cold. We'd have snack time sometimes. They'd bring us popcorn, or they just had like little snack packs of things like Oreos and Ritz crackers, sometimes like little things of apple juice. I remember wanting Oreos. I got Oreos. It was amazing. Something I tasted that I could remember. I was starting to have some catatonia that I guess everybody decided to ignore because I was doing it on purpose. They noted it in the notes. I was starting to seize up on my left side, having trouble talking. I was starting to have trouble feeding myself with utensils, and a nurse had sat with me while I was eating my lunch, and my left hand had froze up into a fist, so tight, and I couldn't move it. I couldn't get it unclenched. And I was so confused, and I was freaking out, and I told her, I'm like, I'm scared. And she said, of what? I'm like, of this right here. You know, she helped me unclench my fist, but I told her I was scared. And all I could do to reassure me was tell me, it's gonna be okay. We'll talk to the doctor. My hair at the time was a rat's nest. Yeah, I just let it go because I couldn't comb it. I started trying to escape when I stole key cards. I tried to anyway. I mean, I'd watch the nurses key cards off of their scrubs. I would rip them off. You know, they had the pulley, so I ripped one off once and tried to get out using that, and I mean, they had security there and several nurses, you know, to control me because I was very determined to get out. I was also starting to hallucinate, and looking back at all this stuff that I know now, I know what was hallucinations and what's not. I was convinced on the other side of the door that I came in was my family doctor, my mom, my dad, my sister, and Shane, all sitting on the other side of this door calling my name, and I was crying so hard, and I was yelling at the nurses saying, you have them. They're right on the other side of the door. Please let me see them. And they said, nobody's there, Ryan. I was so convinced that they were there, and I was saying, you were keeping me from them. You were keeping me. But the glass on the door that I thought that everybody else was on this other side of, it was like just a little small thing of glass. I was gonna break it. And I remember taking a chair from the little commons area that we had and dragging it all the way over there. And I remember nurses asking me as I walked by the nurse's station, Ryan, what are you doing? I was gonna do it. I told them I was gonna get out of here. I was gonna throw that chair at the glass to break it to get out. You know, and I remember thinking about doing it in my head, but I didn't actually think I was going to do it. They took the chair away from me very quickly, and I resisted. I was always resisting at this point. Every day. I think I saw the doctor maybe a couple more times. From what I know, the nurses were reporting my behaviors, bizarre and unusual, as they were to him, and it was just me acting out. So more psych meds I got, which is clinically proven to make encephalitis worse. Psych meds. I was telling the nurses, I'm gonna die in here, aren't I? I'm never getting out of here. And they would tell me, no, that's not true. It's almost like a bad dream. But I realized that these weren't dreams. I had thrown up once right in front of the nurse's station, my meds, in which I asked for more. After that, I think it was very early in the morning. I told them I was going to throw up, and then I went to bed, and then I remember the next morning, I remember seeing that on the floor, thinking like, did I do that? That was me? My behavior was getting worse. The encephalitis was getting worse. I was disrobing because I was constantly hot. I was sweating all of the time. High blood pressure, always. It's recorded. I was having trouble speaking. I was pulling my hair out. I was resisting any sort of redirecting that they did for me. I would take off my clothes and try to walk out of my room, and someone would stop me. I once remember I took a shower and I got so frustrated and tired because all the water from the shower, there's only one drain in the bathroom in your room, and all of the water had to go to this one drain, and I was thinking to myself, like, where am I going to put my clothes? I can't put them on the floor, they're going to get all wet. I remember getting out of the shower, soaking wet. Nurse came in, saw me just sitting on my bed crying, but then she came in with more towels, and she, oh my God, Ryan, what are you doing? Also, there was a time where I took off all the covers and sheets from my bed because what I thought in my head was like, well, they have to change these every day, right? I thought I needed to strip the bed myself and get new things. And when I did that and put them in a pile, they came in and said, what are you doing? And I was like, I just needed to, my sheets need to be different, right? Like, they need to be cleaned. And the nurse says, no, you need to make your bed. Like, what are you doing? And so I got upset and I started to try and make my bed. And I was asking for this nurse's help, and I was saying, please help me make my bed. And she says, if you want to get out in the real world again, you got to know how to make a bed. And I said, my mom always helped me make my bed. And yes, when I was little, my mom did help me make my bed because it was hard to get the corners. And she refused until I guess maid service came and did it for me. There was a time I remember where the doctor wasn't available and we had his, like, on vacation or something, and we had a PA that was with him a couple of times do telehealth calls with us. And I remember being so confused and worried that he wouldn't be able to see me, and we were in this room with a nurse and everybody had to take turns to go into that room with the TV and do telehealth call with him. And he would ask us, every time we would see any sort of doctor, physician, he would ask us the same questions. I mean, it was only two guys. The doctor that treated me and this physician's assistant, they'd ask us the same questions every time, me. And I couldn't understand him. I didn't understand what was going on. And I was really close to the camera. And I remember him saying, back up, Ryan. You got to back away from the camera. You got to back up away from the camera. I remember being so close to the camera because I'm like, you can't see me. I felt not heard. There was fits. I was having fits. I was screaming at the top of my lungs and yelling, and things were just getting really out of control and what they would say manic. I guess one day I pushed a table, I guess really hard. I don't remember pushing the table. I don't remember doing something violent, but I guess that it was putting another patient in the little commons area in danger. So I think it was maybe one nurse and a security person. I don't know, I just remember there was a lot of people. On the inside of this kind of C shape where the nurses, you know, there was doors that were locked on the other side, the opposite side of the patient rooms. And one day they took me and they put me in solitary confinement. Right out of the movies, padded room. I truly did not understand what I did. I don't remember what I did. I remember being in there because of how traumatic it was. Everything I remember was due to trauma. Because the trauma level it reached in my head was so significant that I remember it. It was a completely padded room, blue pads everywhere. There was a bench in the middle. The room wasn't very big, smaller than our actual rooms. When the door closed, and on the inside, when there's no handle, no door handle, I lost it. I was freaking out. I was elbowing the glass on this door with the wires in it, crisscrossing, and I was hitting it with my fists and my elbows and trying to break it and screaming and telling him to let me out. First thing I did was figure out a way to escape. I didn't know how. I was looking at the ceiling tiles. I was standing up on the bench. I'm like, can I reach the top so I could climb up and out? I was walking and pacing around this room, punching the glass and trying to like kick the door open. And I was thinking, you know, I can't punch the glass because I would cut myself because of the wire. It would really hurt bad, so I should probably stop. So I did. And I was in there, which felt like forever. And I felt like I was in there forever. And I felt like I was not ever going to be able to come out. What they recorded as 10 minutes felt like hours to me. Who knows how long I was in there, because what they recorded, I can tell you, is not true all the time. I was so scared. And I didn't understand. When they came and got me, I was laying down on the floor underneath the bench. After I calmed down, I guess, the nurse asked me if I was going to behave. And I said, yeah, I'll behave now. That's what I started saying. I was like, there's cameras in there. And I was telling him, looking right up in the camera in the corner, telling him, I was going to behave now. Please let me out. They let me out. And I went back to my room, where I guess I slept. I'm not sure. There was times where I was really misbehaving and they would redirect me to bed. Just more proof that I was so exhausted. I would hit the bed and I would start snoring, is what they would say. Immediately out. I remember being tired. I remember being so tired. I got locked in solitary confinement twice. The second time was bad too. The second time I was having more hallucinations and I thought that somebody else was in there with me. They really weren't. I think at this point they were sedating me, like giving me shots in my arms to sedate me. The second time they had put me in confinement, I remember if they asked if I needed to go to the bathroom, which the door for the confinement was here and the bathroom was right here, and it was just catty corner. So I went over to the bathroom, in which there was like 2 security guys and a nurse. I had to go pee with the door open. At that time, I was like, well, I'm going to try and escape. So I ran full blast right for the exit, back out into the hall, and they caught me. And right back into confinement I went. Told me I can come out when I'm calm. They did give me a pillow and a blanket on that bench. It was just like a padded bench. It wasn't very comfortable at all. I remember walking around, dragging my hand against the wall and being alone. I fell asleep in there, and when I woke up, the door was open. So I went out, confused. They asked me if I wanted something to eat. I never ate in there or had water. Like I said, I don't know how long I spent both of the times in there. My phone calls my mom would make to me were becoming hard to understand. I was mumbling my words. What I said was very short. "Okay, Mom, bye," was all I would say. And she'd ask me how I was doing. And she told the nurses she didn't understand what was going on. Sometimes she'd call and they'd just say I'm not available because I was having a bad day. Come to find out, those bad days were when I was more than likely having a seizure. in which a lot of the nurses saw as behavior. Don't know. Never recorded it. I was urinating myself. They thought I was doing it on purpose. I'd have to get in to change the clothes. I'd pass out on the floor, naked. I once got gout in my mouth. Don't know how that happened. I remember they made me swish and spit this really nasty stuff to get rid of it. I didn't do it for that long. I remember talking to the girl with the yellow hair, coloring pictures. I had colored a picture for my sister. I'd colored a lot of pictures by now. And she told me, you can hang them up on the wall. We were not allowed in each other's rooms. Oh no. I remember sneaking into her room and looking around and thinking, how did you get all these pictures on the wall? Like, how did you hang them up? I want to know. And she says, you just take toothpaste and you put them on the back of the pictures and you stick them to the wall. She said the house cleaning people don't really seem to care. They leave them up. So that's what I started to do. I had pictures on the walls in my room. Then I took them all down because I thought I was leaving. I don't know. I would walk into other people's rooms, wandering. They'd yell at me, redirect me, get me back, and then it was getting bad, really bad. They put me in 4-point restraints, hard restraints, because what I was starting to do was so unpredictable. Like, I would be sleeping and I would sit up and my arms would be held straight out in front of me and I would just be looking forward, or my eyes would be closed. I was saying really weird things. I was, I guess, sitting in my room once and I had said, look at all those baby polar bears walking by. I remember falling. I fell hard once. I remember I was getting brought back to my room. I didn't have any pants on and it was dark. I remember it being dark. I was always up at night because I couldn't sleep because of the meds and probably encephalitis. I was walking and I fell to my knees so hard on the carpet. I could feel it. And the lady just goes, Ryan, you can't just sit there. And I said, I can't move my legs. I had no control over my body. I told him that. He didn't believe me. At this point, I did not know. I was completely unaware. My family was completely unaware also that the doctor who was in charge of me had started the paperwork with the county court for me to be transferred to a long-term mental health facility. Was getting permission from the county attorney, from all the right people through the county, for me to get transferred as an adult to a long-term care facility. If I was there for another week, I would have been there. I do remember being in restraints. I remember having my hand tucked behind my back. I was fighting them all of the time because I didn't understand. I couldn't move my legs, my arms. I was strapped down to a bed for hours. Hours. When they finally, after 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe Ryan doesn't have something mentally wrong with her, a behavioral issue, but maybe neurological. Looking back, my family and I, that the doctor that was treating me, he was like, let's consult a neurologist. What the hell? And the neurologist looked at my paperwork and said, we need to test for, a number of things. One of them being encephalitis. The only way you can diagnose encephalitis is through a cerebral spinal fluid in a spinal tap. I remember when they did the spinal tap. I had ended up doing like 3, 4. I remember the first one. I was constantly moving because that's how it was. That's the point of my brain was in. Walking into walls was pretty common. trying to like walk through the walls, I guess. And I would just sit on the floor. I'd fall and sit on the floor and just sit there and stare off what was probably a focal seizure happening. And then sometimes I would have grand mal seizures. I had a code called on me when I was unresponsive on the behavioral health unit, which was never recorded in my paperwork. I was screaming. I don't remember this. But the only reason why we know this is because my parents saw the doctor who had responded to that code and said, "Hey, I just saw her this morning." The day my parents saw me, finally. And my mom, "What do you mean you just saw her this morning?" "Well, she was a code. She wasn't responding." Never recorded in my notes, my medical notes. My family was desperate. They're getting desperate. My mom was trying to do everything in her power to see me. And when the neurologist had recommended that I needed a spinal tap to get the cerebral spinal fluid to test for encephalitis, along with a number of other infections, the doctor that was treating me had called my mom and said that we're going to need to do this procedure on Ryan. And my mom at the time knew I was so incoherent. I could not speak well. I could not write. I could not talk. I could not do anything. Walk. Couldn't walk. And she said, "You're going to need somebody to sign for that, right? For the permission, because obviously Ryan is too incapacitated to even do it herself." And he said, "Oh yeah, I suppose we will." They said that they'd ask for her signature and then they would take me in for the spinal tap. When she got there, I was already in the suite having it done. It's a little bit messed up, huh? Yeah. They never sedated me. They never sedated me because I remember how traumatic it was. At this point, I was so scared of things happening to me. I was on my stomach. I had a nurse up by my head, and all I knew is my shirt was up and my pants were pulled down. There was 2 guys holding each of my legs, and there was a doctor that was doing the actual procedure. I remember the room was very bright, and I kept moving, and I remember the nurse telling me, "Hold still, Ryan, hold still," and I was crying, and I was freaking out, because I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was happening to me. All I knew was I was exposed, and there was men behind me. I was trying to turn around to look. And I remember thinking to myself, I was looking at this female nurse who was up by my head holding my hands to make sure I wouldn't move and my head down. And I was just thinking to myself, "You're not going to let anything bad happen to me, right? As a woman?" I never felt the spinal tap because of how scared I was. Being held down against my will. And guess what? The spinal tap that they did, because I was moving, was crap. And they sent it off to Mayo to get a diagnosis of the list of things. I mean, they couldn't use the sample because of how bad it was. Because I was moving so much. After that, my mom saw me. My dad too. He was there. They were mad. I remember my hands being in restraints so tight against the bed. I knew I was in a bed and I knew I had restraints on. They were leather. They were hurting my wrists. I couldn't move. I couldn't get up. I couldn't talk. My parents saw me. I was so bruised up. I had so many bruises. And I was extremely malnourished and dehydrated. I lost like 40 pounds. I was in bed, and my mom saw me, and I remember in my head, it was blurry. It was blurry because I didn't have my glasses on. They took my glasses away from me at some point. I don't know when. They told my parents I didn't have my glasses on was because they kept falling off. I remember I was sitting up. We were back in my room up on the behavioral health unit because they refused to leave my side after they saw me, because that lumbar puncture is what it's called, took place on a different floor in the hospital. They refused to leave my side when they saw me. My mom and dad came up, and I remember my dad asking, Ryan, do you know who I am? I remember thinking in my head, like, my conscience was there. Yes, I know who you are. And my dad. And what's my name? What's my name? What's your name, Ryan? And I guess the only thing that was coming out of my mouth was mom, dad, mom, dad, mom, dad, over and over again. Until I stopped. My mom was yelling at the nurses saying she can't see, she needs her glasses. Which they said, they keep falling off her face. I had gotten up. My mom witnessed this. I had gotten up and walked straight into a wall, fell down. It started having a seizure. She called the nurses. She's having a seizure. Someone come, please. The nurses come. Like, I don't know, she said like 4 or 5. Like, my mom, she's like, obviously, she's having a seizure. And they go, no, that's just what she does. She's just having a bad day. I was just having a bad day. I was on the strongest of the strongest anti-psychotic meds when I left. My mom and dad made the arrangement for me to be transferred to Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha. They knew, my mom knew, my dad knew the right people to get me a bed. The problem is they don't take people who are on antipsychotic meds because they don't have a floor for mentally ill patients. They have a neurology floor, which is where I needed to go. Through people my parents knew, I was able to get a bed there after the guy, whoever's in charge of transferring patients at our local hospital said, she can't get there, they won't allow her, there's no beds available. And then she's all on these antipsychotic meds, they won't take her. My mom and dad, they pulled the right strings, knew the right people, and a bed magically opened up for me. I was transferred the next day. My lumbar puncture happened. My mom and dad saw me. My mom demanded that I be put down on the intensive care unit of the hospital that I was at, our local hospital. Nurses had said maybe I hadn't slept for a few days. They weren't sure. If I did, it was only a few hours. My mom ordered for me to be on a Precedex drip, which makes you go to sleep. She knew that's what I needed. And then they started working out the details of how to get me transferred out of there. Because they could not handle what I had. And that doctor, that psychiatrist, I think he's a psychiatrist, he saw my parents before I left and said, she still has bipolar. And she's manic. They were furious. When I had gotten home, July 8th of 2021, I asked, what happened to me? What happened to me in Norfolk? I remember my mom, my dad telling me there was a doctor there who had treated me really bad. Had thought I had something else that didn't. He wouldn't communicate with my family, tell them what was going on. They were getting more information out of from the nurses than they were from actually him. And I remember thinking, I had asked him, I said, and this doctor's still there, working on people. And my dad They said, yeah, he is. And I said, what? He's treating other people? He has patients still? I thought he would be fired. I could not believe that. I got mad. Because I soon realized that what I thought was dreams and bizarreness was actually real. I remember the pain when they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me here in our local hospital. They were doing a bunch of tests, and a nurse called my mom, a nurse from the behavioral health unit, and she goes, we think Ryann has encephalitis. We think she has anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis. And my mom was like, what? She said, me and the other nurse had been talking, and we looked up these symptoms, and she seems to be acting like this. Granted, this was like the week I left. And she said, don't tell anybody. But they're testing Ryann for this encephalitis. Don't tell the doctor I told you this. How messed up is that? All I can see is this was arrogance. This doctor is not old. He would have learned about this. To understand the difference between neurological and psychological. How can somebody be diagnosed with bipolar in weeks? These symptoms of encephalitis came on so quickly. I got to UNMC by ambulance. I don't remember it because I was knocked out. My mom at the time, she was calling the shots. She saved my life. I got to UNMC and they started the process of taking me off of all the antipsychotics because they had to take them all off in order for me to start treatment for encephalitis, which was steroids, high dose steroids, plasmapheresis, plasma exchanges, Rituxan, several NG tubes, and I got gastric tube. I looking back at the photos, the videos they took of me then, I barely recognized myself. When I got transferred, because my mom knew the head of the neurology department, explained to her on the phone before I was transferred what was happening to me. She goes, Ryann has encephalitis. She needs to get here now. The one who's treating me here refused to believe that I had nothing else besides bipolar. Yes, was some of it encephalitis? Yeah. But the way they handled the situation was extremely uncalled for. You kept me away from my family. And if you didn't, I wouldn't have been kept away. I would have got treatment sooner. There's 6 levels of the type of encephalitis I have. I was at level 5 of 6. 6 being needing to be on a respirator because the loss of being able to breathe. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't swallow. I was about there. And that is where permanent brain damage happens. I got out of our local hospital on May 21st. I went in April 21st. I got better. And so badly. I want all of those nurses, all of that staff, that doctor who treated me, Dr. H, to know that I'm alive. And I remember. And I hope that seeing me taught you all a lesson.
so something like this does not happen to somebody else again. I want my voice to be heard. I have been quiet for a while now. It's taken me a long time to get to this point. I go to therapy in Omaha every Monday for PTSD. I do EMDR to reprocess the trauma that I have been through and putting myself back into I'm safe. It's hard. It's really hard. This type of encephalitis was only discovered in the United States in 2007. And if you don't know, the famous movie on Netflix, Brain on Fire, had what she had. She landed herself in a neurology floor right off the bat. They didn't believe her either. But God, I felt like I was being abused. Not believed. Telling everybody I was scared. I wanted to go home. I need to see my mom. Begging. Bargaining. It was a hard fight. Getting better. I got transferred. I was at UNMC, or Nebraska Medicine, for 2 months. Yeah, 2 months. Then I was moved to Madonna Rehabilitation until July 8th, where I was released to go back home, where I stayed with my parents. What had happened to me was not only incredibly traumatic for me, but for my family. They were told by neurologists at the med center that it will probably be years until I'm back to the way I was. But when they did my assessment at Madonna, they said 3 weeks she'll be here, and I was just there for 3 weeks, and then I was able to go home. I will share my treatment of the med center and how different it was from what I remember. I'm not saying anybody is a bad person who works at our local hospital, but I want to make sure that I'm not forgotten, that my story is here and that it's impactful, so others can learn. These medical professionals can learn, because all I know is they think I don't remember, because I was too out of my mind and crazy to even remember a single thing. My PTSD came from staying on the behavioral health unit. Extreme trauma. Constantly stuck in the mode of fight or flight. I was constantly worrying I was going to die. Never see my family again. And that's how it was going to end up. I want people to share this video so others in the medical community can know that you cannot treat everybody that is coming out with these clinical signs and make a diagnosis right there and not look any further into it, because it hurt me and it's hurt a lot of people with encephalitis. So many people with encephalitis get misdiagnosed. People who have it worse than me, they actually get transferred to long-term mental health facilities where their encephalitis only gets worse to the point of death. Share this far and wide for me. My name's Ryan, and I'm an AE warrior. Thank you if you watched this far, because this is incredibly healing for me. Have a good day wherever you are, and be safe.